Hi guys, this is Mark McRae from markmccrae.com, and today we're very lucky to have Andrew McCarthy-Wood with us.
Lucky. So we're going with that.
Okay. we're going with lucky. That's good enough. And it's a funny story how we met today. As some people know, one of the businesses that I enjoy as a hobby is buying and selling domain names. And as it happened, Andrew was interested in one of the domains that I happen to have. And as he was only 50 minutes away, he decided to drive through. And this afternoon we had some coffee and we were just talking. And I thought it's a great chance to just grab a local businessman and have a talk. So Andrew, could you tell us what do you do? What do you do for a living?
Well, in the spirit of winging it,
yeah,
that's how we had a conversation about that. Yeah, look, thank you for the opportunity for having me up here, especially on such short notice. And we've had some interesting conversations already. Yep. But essentially, similar sort of areas to some of the areas that you're working in, and that's very much through digital engagement, online, connecting people with the communities through real, true engagement, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting, I mean, where we are here in the Sunshine Coast, to meet somebody like Andrew, who's so tech savvy and so aware of what's happening in the digital world, which is why I found him so interesting. But if you were to summarize what you do in one paragraph or one sentence, what would it be?
Look, if I was going to put that into one paragraph, I don't deal directly with end clients as we have been talking. I support those that do, probably a little bit like yourself. The space that I like to work in is where there's a business or a brand. Sometimes they're interwoven and they're one and the same. But to work with them to truly engage with their respective audiences. So rather than just marketing, really engaging, which is different to marketing. Engaging is very much about taking on a real two-way conversation, say with your audience or your client or whoever it is that you want to deal with, where I think the traditional sense of marketing is just broadcasting out your brand, and you could maybe put it as putting a big net over and hoping that you catch a few in between. I think engagement is more focused and it's definitely more rewarding.
So how do you engage them then?
Now we have better tools than ever before. I think that a lot of this we were talking about off camera, but with the social network digital revolution, now rather than, and if you want to go back to traditional media, as an example, if you put an ad in a paper, you never really got any real incremental feedback off that advertising in, say, a newspaper. You put the ad in there and maybe your phone rang a bit more or it didn't. And that's how you would gauge whether you put a good advertisement, whether you put a message out there that people were interested in or not. Now with social networks and the other digital tools that you've got in real time, and I know you were talking about this as an area that you spend a lot of time learning and investing in understanding. But when you put a message out now in real time, you can get a real sense of whether A, is it engaging, and B, get feedback on that so that you can then build your organisation to better serve those that you're wanting to engage with.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. Somebody said, especially with below the line marketing, where I think it was Ogilvy who said 80% of his marketing is wasted. He's just not sure what 80% of, or was it the 80-20 rule? Most of it was wasted. But there was a guy there I read about who was in casino marketing, and they had paid millions of dollars to have billboards all over Las Vegas. And once they started analyzing it a little bit, they figured out that the company that they had hired had found where the casino manager lived and followed him to the casino and put all the billboards along that way. So it appeared that he was, the billboards were everywhere, but really they were just in that particular route. That's how hard it is to really monitor below the line marketing, offline marketing, whereas, like you're saying, the online stuff.
A similar instance where you would find a so-called digital security provider the first thing they would do is go and break into your system and then essentially say over here, oh, look, we can help you fix it. It's got some similarities there, but with digital engagement now, and I think people becoming more both cynical and savvy around those areas, you can't fake it anymore. You really need to produce real results, and they can, in a lot of cases, see the results that you're producing even before you report back to them. And I can see that in a genuine way. And something that I'm a huge fan of is that you truly engage with your target.
The intent is there. Because a lot of that stuff that people hire, in fact, to give you an example, we had hired 9 Facebook experts.
Yeah, right.
And of those 9 Facebook experts, all of them required us to put up either 5,000, 7,500, 10,000 before they did anything.
Yeah.
And once you've paid that money, they just didn't deliver. It's not real.
Yeah.
And that's why we took matters into our own hand, and we have a team that does Facebook, for example. But a lot of the people that you will hire out there who do content or wherever, it's just moving air. There's nothing really happening. There's no true engagement. There's no true followers. There's no true loyalty. And that's what I like about what you do, is that you seem to be very engaged with your clients. I mean, it's almost to the point where you've put a blanket over it and you're taking that whole thing over. Would that be right?
Well, yes, but also, isn't that terrific? Like just what I took out of what you were saying then. With the social media, you engage so-called Facebook experts, but you also had the mechanisms to keep an eye on how that's going.
That's a good point.
And then also from that derive whether you thought you were really getting true results or not, which I think that's been a really good evolution in real engagement and, let's call it marketing as well, where if you go back to when we only had what we call now traditional mechanisms for marketing, you didn't really have an idea because a sales rep could come in and say, you really need to be advertising in our paper. We have a circulation of 38,000, for example. You would then go and spend that money and advertise in their paper. And then they'd be in the next week going, that ad was awesome. It looked really, really good in our newspaper. It got circulated to our 38,000.
And then they tell you the readership was double.
Exactly right. Where now you can actually see for yourself, well, like what I'm getting told over here, is that really happening? And I like what you've been saying about the incremental measurement. You don't just measure it social media and then go, we measured it with success there. You can now measure all the way from the start to the end, depending on what that outcome is that you want. Yeah.
And that's the great thing about what you do, is you follow that whole process through social media, blogs, whatever you're doing, to really measure the whole thing. But if you were to give the people watching here one tip about engagement, what's the one secret? What's the one thing you've found works the best?
Yeah, there is one, and it's above everything else. You can have the bells, the whistles, you can have the shiny campaigns. At the end of the day, in this day and age, it really doesn't matter unless you're genuine. So my number one tip is true engagement. You need to be genuine about your engagement. I think people now, they're far more cynical, and they're also far more educated to be able to tell whether you're genuine in your message or not. So you get the message right, which you were talking about it earlier too, just the emphasis on content.
We had this, we were talking earlier about, there was a group of 15 CEOs.
Yeah.
We used to get together once a month to help one another. And when this is about a year and a half ago, so it's not that long ago. And I asked everybody, so of the 15 people, how many people have a Facebook page? So these are CEOs and business owners. Only half had a Facebook page, and only one actually knew what to do on a Facebook page. The others just kind of had it. Yeah. So they don't really know what's going on out there. And where people are just now, I called it naked marketing. Whereas they got to see who it is. The days of having a business where you're at arm's length and you don't talk to them is gone, because they have tabs. They're just going to research you. They're just going to find out who you are. So it's got to be real. So what you're saying is bang on. Moving away from the social marketing and talking about business. What's the hard bit about your business? What's the hardest thing you think to make that business model work?
The hard bit, but probably also the most rewarding part of it is the execution. We can sit here quite easily and say, oh, this is a really good idea and get very, very excited about that. But quite often, more than not, and that might have been what you found with some of your so-called Facebook expert providers. They probably promised you the world and they, in fact, probably got excited about it themselves. But then to deliver, which, as you found, there was a struggle to see that that's what was actually happening, to really go out there and truly execute. And what makes that so much easier is if that person that has engaged you to put that campaign together is true and sincere in the message that they're wanting to get across in the engagement, then it's so much easier for you. And I think that's probably the challenge, but equally the most rewarding.
So is there people who you won't take on then?
People that, look, if...
I mean, if you're having a conversation and you think, oh, this guy's bullshitting, or this is just, I want hits, or I want likes, or I want whatever.
Yeah.
You still take the business?
No, look, and, no. And I'm probably known for that. I've had some fairly robust conversations at times because I think, as I explained to you, I sit very much in a wholesaling position. And I have at times said, look, we don't want to be part of this because part of what we do, we also have some brands that help that engagement happen. So you have to look after and nurture that as well. And in a sense, it's important that you demonstrate that you can do what you're talking about. So quite often, rather than us saying, oh, we could maybe do this and see what happens, quite often we come from a position of, well, have a look at this example. And if you put this example and that example together, that's getting very close to what you want to do. We've done that. We've got that experience. Let's do that. So if you're having a discussion, which is very, very important, and you get a sense that there's not a real genuine story to tell, I think you're much better off for both parties to step back and say, look, we're maybe not the best fit.
Yep. Absolutely.
Do you find the same thing?
Well, yeah, because, it's like if you, unless you're passionate about it, right? I think Steve Jobs says this, unless you're obsessed and passionate about it, it never works because at some stage you're going to become up against hardship, problems, everything else. And it's only the passionate person who overcomes those because everybody else gives up, right? That's the walls to stop the people who shouldn't be there. So there's got to be something that you want to do. And, put it in a personal perspective, this idea of helping entrepreneurs, I think of them as a tribe. This is my tribe, right? And everybody else's tribe is being helped here, there, and everywhere. But for the entrepreneur who's struggling, and I want them to have an area, a place, a forum, a focus where there's other people who are going through the same stuff they are. Genuinely, because there's a lot of entrepreneurial and business stuff out there which is just crap, or they're talking about stuff that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't move the needle. So I want them to have a place where they can ask real questions and get real answers, whether it might not be the answer that they want. But you've said the hard part is... It
reminds me of a saying that I want to be surrounded by people that will be honest and tell a true story at the risk of being fired. And I think in a lot of cases, that's a position that you really need to be in, isn't it? Where you're prepared to maybe deliver the news that they're not seeking, but the true, honest core of it at the risk of getting fired. Because at the end of the day, if you go down that path and you just go, yes, aren't you just going to walk yourself into a corner where you can't deliver anyway?
My father-in-law, who's a keen fisherman, told me this the one time. He said, Mark, a fisherman can always smell another fisherman. It's kind of like people can tell if something is real or not. What's the biggest mistake you made in business, you think?
Oh, gee, have we got a bit of time to list them out? The biggest mistake, I don't think there's any one biggest mistake, but there are mistakes, and you can probably summarise them.
I mean, if you were thinking in terms of you hired somebody, or you did the wrong marketing, or you did the wrong thing, if you
Yeah, I think, look, real life experience and being out there and doing it, you can't really pay for that sort of stuff. So, when people come out with that statement, I wouldn't change anything. Absolutely. Like, if I was to look back, there's a whole lot of things I'm probably more in the camp of. If I knew back then what I know now, I would probably do things a little bit differently. But I'm also grateful for those lessons along the way as well. And you talk about the space with the entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs can quite often, I think, jump into things without doing a whole lot of research. It's awesome. It's exciting. This idea is going to revolutionise the world, and I think that's where. And if I can use a bit of an analogy, but I remember, and I can't even remember where I read it, but somebody was saying, look, if you want to become a really good drug addict, go and hang out with people that are
drug addicts,
and they're going off the cliff, and you'll soon become just as good as them. If you want to become really successful and good, say, in business or in community engagement or in marketing, go and seek out those.
Hang out with those people, that tribe.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Are businessmen made or born? Can you become a great businessman or entrepreneur?
Nature over nature. Is it really one or the other, or is it a combination?
Well, I see people, and I speak to people, my main currency is business people. And I see people all the time who shouldn't be in business. Yeah. And it's a personal thing, because I think that there has to be something innate in somebody who wants to achieve something. And somebody who just started a business to make money, when they hit those walls, they tend to crumble. But I'm wondering can you train yourself to overcome it? Is it how bad you want it?
Yeah, look, it's interesting that you say that, because in the education sector, with the next generation coming up through schools, particularly secondary college or secondary schools, there's a lot of talk at the moment about, well, what are the jobs of the future going to be? And there's a lot of unknowns there. Like, you have a look at where we're spending a lot of our time as far as our businesses. 20 years ago, you just didn't
do it like that. Yeah, it's a good point.
And 20 years ago, could you have foreseen that you would be using something that's considered to be at its core all about social and people interacting with each other, to being a very important business platform for you? I saw the way that you operated today. You're operating a lot of your business through social networks, not only to help other clients with their brands and their connection and all of that sort of stuff, but for you to actually conduct communication with other business partners and what have you, and providers and all of that sort of stuff. But to come back to your question around all of that, there's so many unknowns in the future, but where they're looking at now is, okay, so why would we teach somebody in high school now to be a really good mechanic? Because in 10, 15, 20 years' time, you may not need any mechanics. There may be robots to come in and service your car from end to finish, so there's no need for that sector anymore. Or do we look at educating the next generation to have grit, to have true grit, and to not only have a thirst of learning, but know how to learn, so learn how to learn. And I've actually heard that phrase recently.
Learn how to learn. Yeah. But you still haven't answered the question. Well, are you born with it? Or?
And look, this is where it comes back to that, because it's not an easy answer. It's actually quite complicated in a sense. But
let me put it at some point in your timeline, there has been drama, right? There has been a tough spot. What got you over that? Was it the personality? Was it something that you learned, that it's like you just got to get through it, or is it something inside you that...
And this comes back to that, is it nature over nurture or nurture over nature? Is it something that you learn, or is it something that you have that's innate in you? And I think it's a combination.
Combination of both.
Of both, life experiences. Because somebody that may have all of the courage and the grit and the determination in the world may have a catastrophic thing happen here that destroys that. Or it may be somebody that isn't quite strong enough to lead. And if I can take it into the political world, how many times have there been, people that have ended up through circumstances, leaders in the world that have left an indelible mark on history. And Winston Churchill is one of those. I'm sure that through his career, if you go back before he was the Prime Minister of England, go back through some of the history, and there'll probably be people there that would say he'd never make it. But maybe if you bring that together with some of the circumstances and the experiences that he had along the way.
So it's a combination of both.
I think so. I think it's a combination of both. I don't think it's a simple answer of just saying a person's either got it or they haven't.
How do you deal with stress?
Actually, it is something that I'm quite mindful of. And one of those things is, again, the same sort of sector that you're in. We can spend a lot of time in the digital world not moving, and that's a very important thing to be mindful of. Just get up and go for a walk. Get up and go for a walk. Keep your relationships with those around you engaged. Talk. I have a couple of great outlets through the local community that I'm involved in. I find that that's very helpful. And give, like unqualified giving.
I'm a believer in that too.
Yeah, do you
anybody?
Find, yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, but and I had this conversation recently about whatever I'm doing, I'm 100% present, and it's 100% free. I've got to earn a living, and I've got to have a business, and it's got to, the primary motive of that business is profit. But anyone that comes into my sphere it's a giving type thing. I've always been like that, always believed it, and it's always come back to me. That I have
tenfold.
Yeah, tenfold. There's so many people I can reach out to, who will take that call, or who will answer, or will do a favor, or whatever, only because that in their engagement with me, I've given 110%. So I believe that in everything. I believe it in family. I believe it in business. I believe it in your personal life. Be engaged or don't do it. Don't go through the wishy-washy. I'm just there. So I like to try and be present as much as I can.
That's interesting, because that brings me to probably another line of questioning. And I'm just wondering, like, out of your experience, and as you're talking about, giving without any expectation of return, how do you see, as far as society goes, and when you've got a generation, there's been a lot of reporting and publications around this, but when you've got, like the likes of Facebook, and we've sort of been talking about the digital world, use it, it's free. You go and do a Google search, it's free. And not only do you have that, but you have immediate gratification, whether it be positive or negative. And then you have the young people now today that are going, well, if I can get all of those instantly, that doesn't cost me anything. They're now struggling with the concept of, well, why can't I have a house? And why do I... Are
you talking about like the millennials and it's a different perspective?
Yeah, how do you see that shift?
I think it's the way, well, first of all, you've got to acknowledge it and say that's where we're at. You can't change it. But it's unique to the Western world, I think. I mean, if you look at India and China and things like that, they don't have millennials. I mean, they're just people of that age group, and they all work, right? So our experiences are kind of around ourselves and what we read and see, and we're a combination of all of that. But that idea, if you look at the social status of people, it's risen over the years. Life expectancy, health, all of that, and they're just a reflection of that. They're expecting more. But for people who look at stuff and they say, why can't I have it for free? And this is what I'm hoping to have a niche in, is the free stuff is usually worth exactly that. All right, it's worth nothing. So the really good quality stuff you normally have to pay for, or it's in select. You got to know what it is. And it's like, I was watching this guy the other day on YouTube. He's got 250,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he's teaching entrepreneurs, or his audience is entrepreneurs, and he's teaching them how to make a to-do list. Right? So I look at this and I just think, this is just crap. I mean, if you're going to teach entrepreneurs and business people what to do, talk to them at a real level. Talk to them about when they're worried about if they can't pay their rent or their mortgage, or they have to fire somebody, or what they have to go through when they have to make big decisions. All of the stuff that they can't talk about it because it's not real. So you've got a lot of people, all over the world who are consultants or so-called experts, but they've never had their head in the chopping block. And when you're talking to somebody who's experienced that. So free content coming from someone like that is different, but never be afraid to pay for it, because there's one company that I'm thinking of, and it does hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And the biggest department in there, so they've got two departments inside this company, and one gives away free material, and the other one gives away paid material. So of the $300 million, say, that they make a year, the free material one makes $50 million, and the paid one makes $250 million. And what this person who runs this company said is, I don't believe you're having a conversation until they put their hand up with a credit card and said, I'll pay for it. Then your conversation starts. Everything else is just peddling water. So, you know, I think...
You touched on something there too. Just, you mentioned, you know, like you've got people out there that are going for the views, that have been populist, and they're talking about to-do lists there. But one of the things that you mentioned in there is that they're not talking about how to fire somebody when they need to.
Yeah.
In your view, because it's interesting, it's topical. I was just talking with another business owner just last week, and they were talking about staff and, you know, the potential to need to fire somebody, and they hadn't actually done it before. What would be your advice around, you know, the personal approach to, because
it's tough, and I've done it. I've done it a few times, and you know, for me, until the day I die, I want to build the perfect business. Yeah. It's a thing of beauty. It's like an engine for me, right? It's like when a woman looks at shoes or a handbag. When I look at a business, and it doesn't matter how small or big it is, if it runs really well, I can admire it. But if you're carrying weight, I mean, if you're carrying a dead weight, you've got to ask yourself, is this a hobby or is this a business? You've got to depersonalize the decision. So I'm thinking of one occasion a while back where someone had worked with me for so long, he'd become my best friend. So firing your best friend, it's tough. Yeah. But when I looked at it and depersonalized, absolutely that person should be fired. But how do you deal with it? It took me a few days to have that conversation. And while I was thinking about it, in the conversation, that person just said one sentence that gave me a gap. Yeah. And I just took it from there. But I would have made that decision because it would have taken everybody down with them. If you've got a highly paid person, you've got to, you know, and you're looking after your whole overheads. If you've got somebody, you've got 4 or 5 people on $100,000 a year, you can burn through money very quickly. So you've got to be aware and flexible and able to make those decisions, but it's never going to be easy. Yeah. It's always going to be a hard call.
So for a young entrepreneur, they've never needed to fire somebody yet, but they're starting to really get that feeling. What would be your advice to them?
Well, that's where, you know, I was trying to dig a little bit deeper into, are you born or made an entrepreneur? But if you're really looking for that dream, we are all in this together, all of us, and I'm saying human beings. You know, as you know, my entire business has been built since the year 2000, 1998, say, on outsourced people, basically. But you know, sometimes people think because they're outsourced, they don't have feelings, you know, but they're just like you, you know. So you got to treat everybody the way that you would like to be treated. And you mentioned on it earlier about being real. So when I have that conversation with somebody, I make sure that, first of all, it's a good decision, right? So I make sure that I am calm and I'm relaxed and I've thought it through and it's not an impulsive thing or an angry thing. And then when I have that conversation, it's a real conversation and I tell them the truth of the matter. Because I'm never going to fire anybody because I don't agree with them or don't like them if they're doing what they should do. But if you're in business long enough, you'll go through these, you know, ebbs and flows. And when it happens, if you're totally honest with somebody, they get it.
Yeah, look, you've been an entrepreneur for quite a period now. Do you think that you were always born to be an entrepreneur? And this is probably asking the same question that you've asked me in a sense.
I think you are. I think you can improve upon it by learning stuff. But my first entrepreneurial, you know, experiences started when I was 7, selling plastic bags in a market in Glasgow. So, and you know, by the time I was 8, I had actually made more money than my father.
Well done.
You know, it's odd. But what made you want to do that? I don't know. It's just that I've always been fascinated with that ability to take something and make more of it. And I love the people who are in that. They're, like I said, my tribe. They understand that, you know, we're on the same wavelength. It's the same humor. They want the same, they want more. I want to be the best version of Mark McRae that I can be. I want to be, the best financially, spiritually, and physically, the best that I can be. And I can only, from the financial perspective, I never thought I could achieve it by being paid. I always thought you had to go make it.
So those are three big things there in your life that you treat all as top priorities. How do you balance between the three?
That's a great question, and you don't. Right? So everybody says, and that's the other thing that frustrates me is, look for balance in your life. There's no such thing. If you're an athlete, there is no balance, right? You are skewed one way. So what you really look for is harmony. So in my life, in my family, my wife and my children understand how I work, and I can work for very long periods of times when I'm focused, and then when I don't, I'm 100% with them. So I make special days, I take a day just for my wife and a day just for one child and a day for another child. And each day we sort of debrief and we have, so whereas I think I spend more time with my children than most people because I make a point of it. It's just as important to me. But it's more about being, if anybody who's enthusiastic or obsessed or fanatical about something, it's not a perfect circle. They'll always be skewed to that sport, that business, that religion, or whatever it is. So being in business is like that. If you're driven, you can't possibly spend a perfect amount of time with everything. So for me, it's about that being present. If I'm with you or with my wife or whoever I'm with, I'm there. And you get everything when I'm there. So,
Mark, if there's somebody watching us now and they've woken up and found themselves to be an entrepreneur, and maybe they've listened to a few of the points that have been made and they're going, oh, wow, I'm not sure whether I'm cut out to be really an entrepreneur, or maybe they're struggling with a few things. It might not be necessarily that they've got a staff member that they need to let go, but as you mentioned, earlier, they could have their back up against the wall. The bills are coming in and the income's not quite meeting it or whatever. Do you think that you can work with somebody like that to maybe if they're
you can work with anybody, right? It's about passion. I don't care. I know we're talking about, I'm going to interview a guy who his budget's $2 billion tomorrow.
What's the segue?
Yeah.
You may as well talk about that.
But for me, there's no difference between talking to a person like that and somebody with a dream who's got nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to get inside their head. And in one interview, I want to extract as much value as I can so I can give it to the community. And the other person, they have a dream. They have something in them that says, the fact that they're watching this video is an indication that they're looking for something, right? There's something there. So their back's against the wall. You got to make some tough decisions. Make those decisions. It's the people who procrastinate, the people who don't make the decisions that get in trouble. Commit. If you're in shit, commit. Sort it out. Get it sorted. Or, look at everything head on. Get down there and get it, sorted so you can start that dream.
When an entrepreneur, and you see this with businesses quite often, they could start out and it has its honeymoon period. Their local community is behind it because they're doing really well and they're doing great things and they're achieving goals. And then quite often, and you see this on all sorts of scales, when they start to have the hiccups, their detractors all of a sudden come out and they can feel like they're very, very isolated and alone, one and the same, right? Is that the way that it is, or are there networks that they can reach out to and become a part of?
Well, there's this network, but but that is a natural process of growth because there's two things that happen there. If you start and you become reasonably successful, success is your biggest danger because opportunity comes with it. So you get people who say, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, or you make money and you want to try, especially an entrepreneur. Nearly all entrepreneurs are kind of ADD, they're just everywhere. So to keep focus is hard. But when they go through that stage, and this is come back to that question, you absolutely need to know the direction that you're going in or the belief that you're doing so that whatever comes to you is a problem that you know that you can solve. And I'll give you for an example. I think of every problem as an opportunity to grow. So when we were doing big launches, we had, we'd have 50,000 people go to our website within 5 minutes. That's how much traffic was there.
Wow.
And then it would crash systems. So we learned how to deal with that. Then the hacking started. We would be hacked. So we learned how to deal with that. And now we're at a stage where we have 2 different servers and we have this thing that splits the traffic and replicates and all this fancy stuff. And every one of those is a progression on a problem. So now when we have a problem, I don't get as excited about it because I've had so many of them. You know, if it's the first time it happens, your head about explodes. But now it's like, what else have you got? You know, like I've been hit so many times with so many different problems, and we know it's a process we've got to work through in order to solve, and we've got a library of knowledge there that we can pull on. So it becomes harder and harder to rile me. And there will be stuff out there that will get me, but that looking at things and trying to depersonalize the problem, or very often you can be talking to somebody and you think that person is really angry with you, but really you could be anybody and they'd be just as angry.
Yeah.
You know, you just happen to be part of this thing that they're engaged with. So understanding where the real problem is, might not be a person or it might not be where you think it is, but being able to problem solve is important as an entrepreneur.
Does that mean that there's a perspective, you mentioned that you went through the experience of, you know, maybe your first online server crash and the unknown, you know, can be such a daunting thing. There could be entrepreneurs that, or business people that are about to experience the exact same thing. Is it a case of, because it is so unknown to them, then maybe it is just reassuring to have a relationship with somebody like yourself?
Absolutely.
To be able to have that conversation, going, oh, my server's just crashed, and then you can come back and go, you know what, my first one felt like this, but it turned out to be that.
Exactly. I'm a team thinker, right? Yeah. I believe in teams. So as an entrepreneur, when I began, I was all about me. I wanted everything for me. And I've learned to grow out of that. But also in terms of thinking, sometimes just talking out loud and hearing your own voice you can help solve problems. But I'm a group thinker. I'll put a problem into my own team and hear everybody's opinion and then make a decision. When there's a problem that comes in, it's that network of good faith that you put in there. I'll reach out to whoever and say, what do you think of this? And sometimes it's just bouncing it off different people. But there's nothing wrong if you're making a big decision to go to a group, a person, or somebody you trust and just say, can you listen to this and tell me what you think? So, you know, it's like batteries. I'd rather have 10 of them than just the one. And the more people engaged who really are engaged in that decision, the less mistakes you'll make.
Culture in an organisation. Recently, we've seen the reports with Uber and the founder and the CEO of that. He's stepping away, taking some time out, and there's been a lot of reporting around the toxic culture that there is in the organisation. It's on the public record there.
Or inexperience.
How important is it, an entrepreneur, is it true in your view that they can absolutely set the culture regardless of how big their organisation
Absolutely.
is, right from the top to the very, very, very person at the end, the grassroots component of that organisation?
Absolutely. And it all starts with the head, the Steve Jobs, if you like. But I've been involved as a young man in huge companies, and I can tell you that even though you might be 100 levels of management removed from the person at the top, it comes through. So in my organization, I like to think that, you know, I've had lots of heated arguments with my teams, right? But they feel comfortable enough to do that. They know I will never make a rash decision. They know that. They know that I'm a good husband for money. I'm very careful of how we run our companies. They know that they can rely upon me to make a mistake. You know, no one in my organizations have ever been fired for making a mistake. My opinion is that if you're not making mistakes, you're not reaching far enough, right? So I'm okay with that. So the culture that I like to embrace is that, because it's an outsourced culture, just do what you're supposed to do, trust them, and know that there is an almost father-like figure there who's going to be understanding, but also tell you off if you're wrong. But if I could, you know, summarize it, it would be to enthusiastically lead and sort of be fair. So what is that leadership? And I will do something in leadership, but it's a lot about direction. Where are we going, guys? And focus, getting everybody focused onto that, where we're going. And, teamwork and confidence. But if you go into an organization and everybody's lackluster and they're not too sure, if your team members can't tell you what the plan is, there's no hope, right?
You mentioned team members making mistakes. From your perspective, where's the line between taking good risk and reckless risk? How do you identify the difference between the two?
Media buys, for example. We spend somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 a month in media buys. So we have a process that we go through where we buy media buys. So if the media buyer comes in and only somewhere, a really good media buyer is really only going to get you, if he does 10 media buys, only 4 or 5 of them will work. The rest don't. But what was your reason for it? Explain to me your reason.